The barn was already collapsing when the first scream cut through the smoke. Flames tore through the dry wood in seconds, leaping the gap to the feed stores, then the smokehouse, then racing along a fence line toward the stable itself. Horses screamed inside their stalls. A woman ran barefoot across the yard, her nightdress soaked with sweat, dragging her 2 children away from the heat as burning cinders rained down around them. Cattle bolted through broken rails into the dark. By morning, it wouldn't be a barn that had burned. It would be the ranch. Every outbuilding her husband had ever raised reduced to ash and smoke. Before you find out who did this and why, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight, and give this video a like if you're ready for a story of fire, betrayal, and a stranger who refused to look away. Now, back to the ranch. Across the road, 4 men sat on their horses and watched the fire burn. They did not move to help. One of them, older than the rest, with a silver mustache and cold eyes, called out to her over the roar of the flames. "You should have taken the offer." The widow froze. Her children clung to her skirts. She understood in that instant that this was no accident. Then, out of the darkness, a lone rider appeared. He slowed his horse at the edge of the firelight, watching the flames climb, watching the men who hadn't lifted a finger. Then he asked, quiet enough to somehow carry over the roar, "Who did this?" Nobody answered. The men only laughed before riding into the night. Who is this stranger, and why does he care about a fire that isn't his to fight? Stick around, because what happens next changes everything. The cowboy swung down and moved straight into the smoke, pulling a terrified mare from a collapsing stall seconds before a beam gave way. He handed the reins to the widow's son without a word, then checked what fencing hadn't caught, moving with a calm that seemed impossible given the chaos around him. She expected him to ride on once the fire died. Instead, at sunrise, he was still there, kneeling by a scorched post, running his hand along the char. "How long have they been trying to take this place?" he asked. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because that fire started in more than one place. Somebody wanted to make sure it caught everything you had, not just the barn." Her stomach turned cold. She sat with him on the porch steps as the smoke thinned, and for the first time in months, told someone everything. Her husband had died the previous winter, thrown from his horse in a storm, leaving her alone with 2 children and 300 acres a wealthy rancher named Hargrove had wanted for years. She'd refused every offer because the land was her children's inheritance. Then the pressure started. Cattle vanished, the well ran bitter, supply wagons were delayed, threats were nailed to her door. Each new offer was smaller than the last, as if they wanted her to know exactly how little her suffering was worth to them. "The fire was their final warning," she said, voice shaking. "Next time, I think they mean to finish it. Finish us." He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with every detail. Then, "Did your husband keep records?" "He kept everything." What exactly did her husband know before he died? That question would follow both of them for the rest of the story. So don't go anywhere. By the next morning, he hadn't left. He was out past the corral, hammering new rails into place. "Why are you still here?" she asked, arms crossed against the chill. "Fence won't fix itself." "I can't pay you." "Wasn't asking." "Everyone who's ever offered me help wanted something," she said. "Land, mostly." "I don't want your land." "Then what do you want?" He didn't answer right away. To see men like the ones who did this stop getting away with it. They worked side by side for the rest of the day, mending what the fire hadn't taken. She watched him handle a spooked colt with a patience that told her more about him than words could. That evening, exhausted, she admitted, "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Every time I think we're safe, they take something else." "Then don't do it alone." Not love, not yet. But the first fragile thread of trust in a place that had forgotten what trust felt like. The next day, she brought out her husband's old ledger. The cowboy studied it, his finger tracing down. Each entry, until his expression changed. "These aren't only notes about your land." He pointed to 3 other transactions. "The same names sit beside every deal. Your husband wasn't just keeping his own books, he was keeping theirs." This wasn't only about her ranch. Someone had been systematically stealing land across the county, and her husband had found out. Over the next 2 days, the cowboy rode quietly to neighboring families. One old rancher admitted his well had been poisoned until he sold. Another lost his cattle by the dozen. A third described threats against her sons that broke her resolve. Every stolen parcel had ended up in the same hands, Hargrove's. When he returned, the widow was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. "Why are you doing all this? You don't know these people. You don't know me." "Because somebody should have stopped them before they reached your door." "And what happens when they come for you instead?" "Then they'll find out they picked the wrong man." "You keep saying things like that," she said, "like you've said them before. To someone else." He didn't answer that either, and her suspicion sharpened. Days later she learned, almost by accident, that he'd been moving through other territories before he ever arrived at her ranch, quietly investigating land disputes that looked exactly like hers. "Were you really just passing through?" she demanded, voice trembling. "Or did you already know what Hargrove was doing before you got here?" His silence answered for him. "Say something," she said. "Anything. It's complicated. Everything about you is complicated." Everything came to a head at dusk when 4 riders returned, Hargrove himself in front. He didn't dismount. "That fire was a warning," he told her. "Next time, there won't be a ranch left standing, and there won't be a warning first." Then his eyes fell on the cowboy, and something shifted in his face, recognition, and something close to fear. "You," Hargrove said slowly. "I know you. Wyoming, the Caldwell claim." The cowboy's jaw went tight. "You remember that." "I remember losing good men to that mess." "Good men who poisoned 3 wells and burned a family out in the snow," the cowboy said. "I remember it differently." Hargrove's men shifted uneasily in their saddles before he turned and rode off, the others following. The widow rounded on the cowboy the moment they were gone. "What was that? Wyoming? What claim? What aren't you telling me?" "It doesn't matter right now." "It matters to me. You came here without a name, without a past, and now there are men threatening my children because of whatever you're not telling me." He finally gave it to her straight. 2 years earlier, in Wyoming territory, he'd helped expose a nearly identical scheme. Forged deeds, poisoned wells, a family burned out the same way hers had been. The men behind it had been ruined, some jailed. Hargrove had been a silent investor in that operation too, and had walked away clean while others hanged for it. The cowboy had been quietly tracking men connected to it ever since, hoping to find the thread that led back to him. "So this was never really about me," she said, her voice going flat and cold. "I was just the thread you were pulling on. My ranch, my husband, my children." "That's not true. Not anymore." "How am I supposed to know the difference?" "You're not," he admitted. "Not yet. I know that's not enough." "It isn't," she said. "I think you should go." He rode off into the night, leaving her alone with nothing but suspicion and grief. Just when something real had begun to grow between them, it was gone. Do you think he'll come back? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you're feeling that ache right along with her. Alone, she returned to her husband's desk, searching with trembling hands. She found a false bottom beneath a drawer, and inside it, a single folded document, proof that Hargrove had forged land transfer records across the county. Beneath it, in her husband's own hand, one final line. "If anything happens to me, they will come for this ranch next." Her husband hadn't simply died in a storm. He had known too much, and he had known it might cost him everything. 2 days later, 7 riders surrounded the ranch house, Hargrove leading them. "Last chance," he said. "Sign the deed or we finish what we started, and this time your children watch." The widow's blood ran cold, but she didn't move. "You'll have to burn me down with it." Hoofbeats broke through the tension. The cowboy rode back into the yard, stopping his horse between the widow and the men who meant to destroy her. "I told you I'd come back." "You shouldn't have," she said, but there was relief under the anger. He wasn't alone. Behind him, the ranchers who'd lost everything to Hargrove emerged from the tree line, and behind them, territorial lawmen on fresh horses. "I didn't send for them because of tonight," the cowboy told her quietly. "I sent for them a week ago from Wyoming files I'd already built. Your husband's ledger just gave them the last name they needed to make it stick. Hargrove's smile faded. You think this changes anything? It changes everything, the widow said, stepping forward with the document in her hand. This proves every deed you forged, every family you threatened. And it proves what you did to her husband, the cowboy added. He found your name in his own ledger. That's why he never came home from that storm, isn't it? Hargrove's composure cracked for just a moment, long enough. He should have taken the money and kept his mouth shut. It would have been quick, and it would have been quiet. The widow went white, then furious, her voice shaking. You killed him. You killed him, and then you came to bury the rest of us. Hargrove's men reached for their weapons, but they were outnumbered and exposed. Their fire meant to erase the evidence, having instead brought every wronged family in the county to 1 yard. One man lunged at the cowboy, who disarmed him in a single motion that left no doubt about the skill hiding beneath his quiet exterior. 2 more surrendered without a fight the moment they saw the lawman's badges catch the lantern light. The confrontation ended fast, without the bloodshed Hargrove had come prepared for, and every rider who'd ever carried out his orders was taken in chains alongside him. They burned the widow's ranch. Then, a nameless cowboy made them pay, standing in the ashes of everything Hargrove had tried to erase and watching him led away for good. In the weeks that followed, Hargrove's forged deeds were overturned one by one. The stolen land returned to the families who'd lost it. He and every man who'd ridden with him faced trial for fraud, for arson, and for the death of the widow's husband. The empire built on fear and fire collapsed entirely, with no one left standing to rebuild it. The barn was rebuilt, plank by plank, by neighbors who were strangers no longer. Even so, weeks later, the widow watched the cowboy packing his saddlebag, preparing to move on the way he always had. Where will you go? She asked. North, probably. And if you find another place that needs saving? I'll stop if I hear another rifle shot. She stepped closer, her heart pounding harder than she expected. You don't have to keep riding. He waited, saying nothing, watching her. The ranch needs a hand, she added, her voice trembling slightly, a small smile. Is that all I am to you? A hand around the place? She held his gaze. No, it isn't. He set his saddle back down. The man who had arrived asking only one question in the middle of a burning night finally had something worth staying for. The ranch stood rebuilt behind them. The widow was no longer alone, and the children who had once cried in the smoke now laughed freely in the yard. If this story kept you glued to the screen, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more frontier tales of love and justice, and tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. We'll see you in the next one.